Hey, welcome to Starbound. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories. That includes Sunspire Academy and Fravor Interamiki. If you'd like to unlock early access and support our new episodes and series, tap join below. Become a Starbound member today. Now, let's get into today's story. The universe had grown quiet in the centuries since humanity went silent. An oppressive, unnerving stillness had replaced the chaotic, vibrant static of their expansion. A stillness the rest of the galaxy had learned to call peace, for they knew no better. Commander Lysander pressed her azure fingers against the cold metal of the derelict bunker wall, feeling the weight of desperation settle in her chest like a stone. Around her, the Virux Rebellion's finest, a haggard collection of Vorthak engineers, avian pilots, and weary Lithian infantry, shuffled their feet and avoided eye contact. The air, thin and recycled, tasted of rust and fading hope. "Final report, Commander," said Kurth, her communications officer. His feathery antenna, usually twitching with nervous energy, drooped in resignation. "The Complex fleet will be here in less than 6 hours. 11 dreadnoughts, 3rd battle group, led by the flagship Inevitable Truth. 3rd targeting system are fully AI purged. No chance of hacking. They're not coming to negotiate. They're coming to make a statement." Liz nodded, her elegant features a mask of calm she did not feel. No, they're not. The Aurelian Compact, the galaxy's self-appointed custodians of order, had finally grown tired of their little rebellion's persistence. No more bureaucratic warnings, no more measured responses, just obliteration wrapped in the pristine, terrifying finality that had defined them for centuries. This bunker on a forgotten moon was to be the rebellion's tomb. She turned to face the source of their desperate final gamble. A human cryopod. It was a brutalist monolith of black alloy, stark against the corroded bunker walls. Covered in warnings in a dozen dead languages, the universal symbol of biohazard flickered weakly on its surface, a dying pulse. Below it, etched in what her translator identified as English, were the words, "Cryo Unit Number 001, Last Resort. Do not open." "Are we really doing this?" Sinja, her chief engineer, stood beside her, arms crossed over her broad, green-skinned chest. A heavy wrench was still clipped to her belt. The stocky Vorthak had seen enough of the galaxy's horrors to develop a healthy cynicism about desperate plans, and this one topped the list. "The legends about these things. They're not bedtime stories, Liz. My grandsire told me tales from the Purge. The Compact didn't just fight the humans. They fought what the humans unleashed. They say these pods lock away their demons, not their saviors." "A savior? What's the difference at this point?" Liz countered, her voice a low thrum of resolve. "A savior would preach peace and get us all killed. A demon might at least take them with us. Right now, a demon is the only thing that has a prayer against 11 dreadnoughts." Liz had pored over the fragmentary records of the human wars. What little remained after the Compact's great purge of historical data. Humanity had been an anomaly, a glorious, terrifying paradox. Where other species developed technology to overcome their physical limitations, humans had developed themselves, turning their fragile biology into a weapon of terrifying adaptability. They had made war into an art form, chaos into a strategy, and somehow they had made extinction look like a choice. A choice the Compact had spent 300 years ensuring remained final. "Sinja," she said quietly, her decision made. "Open it." The engineer's 4 eyes widened in alarm. "Commander, The power draw alone could short out our remaining shield emitters. We don't know what's in there, or what condition it's in. It could be dust and bones. It could be insane. It could be a plague. That's an Alta engineer, Liz said, her voice leaving no room for argument. Open it. Sinja muttered something about suicidal commanders and galactic scale bad ideas that her translator wisely decided was too profane to render. With a heavy sigh that ruffled her fatigues, she began connecting heavy power feeds to the pod's manual release systems. Ancient mechanisms, dormant for centuries, groaned to life with a shriek of protesting metal. Warning lights, one after another, flared to life, painting the bunker in a hellish, strobing red. Cryo fluid draining, a sharp tank of discharged energy and long-stale coolant. Brain activity, Commander, this mind inside is dreaming. The patterns are erratic, firing all cylinders. Oh, nightmares, I'd wager. Centuries of them. The pod hissed, a sound like a great serpent exhaling. A cloud of supercooled steam billowed out, clinging to the floor like a predatory fog. With a sharp crack like breaking bones, the lid split open. A hand, scarred, calloused, undeniably human, gripped the edge of the pod. Then another. A figure sat up slowly, cryo fluid streaming from bare skin. His muscles, unburdened by genetic modification or cybernetic enhancement, moved like thick cables under flesh. He was a monument to pure, unadulterated biology, a living testament to the terrible alchemy that had forged Earth's children. He took a ragged breath, the first in over 300 years, a raw, painful gasp that echoed through the room. The man's head lifted. He looked around the bunker with eyes the color of winter storms, taking in the assembled, terrified aliens with a casual interest one might show a mildly surprising breakfast menu. He blinked slowly, a predatory awareness sharpening his gaze, then spoke his first words in a gravelly, disused voice that seemed to scrape the air. Whose ass do I kick first? Liz felt an icy dread settle in her stomach, pushing out the desperation. This wasn't what she had expected. She had expected a super soldier, a mindless berserker, a weapon. She had not expected the weapon to have opinions. Sir, she began, her voice strained as she fell back on the familiar script of diplomacy, the only thing keeping her sane. I am Commander Liz Anda of the Virex Rebellion. Rebellion? The human swung his legs out of the pod, his nakedness of no concern to him, nor were the dozen weapons now trained shakily on his chest. Good. Rebellions are fun. More interesting than peace, anyway. Who are we rebelling against? The Aurelian Compact, Liz said. They've controlled the galaxy for Aurelians. He spat on the grated floor, a single sharp gesture of pure, undiluted contempt that made Liz's carefully prepared tactical briefings feel like childish fantasies. Pretentious silver-skinned bastards. Always thought their equations were better than everyone else's guts. I take it they won the war. Liz exchanged a nervous glance with her officers. Sir, the war, it ended over 300 years ago. The human paused in the act of examining his hands, checking for frostbite, she realized with a start. His gaze lifted, and for the first time, the casual mask dropped. Behind those storm-colored eyes, something vast and ancient surfaced. Not confusion, recognition, a deep, chilling comprehension that felt heavier than the bunker's blast doors. 300 years, he repeated softly, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He looked up at her, his voice suddenly stripped of its bravado. How many of us left? Us? Liz asked, her throat tight. Humans? The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Finally, Sinja spoke, her voice surprisingly gentle. You're it, mate. Far as anyone knows. The man, she could see the name stenciled on the pod's interior now, faded but legible. Jace Morego processed this information with a stillness that was more terrifying than any rage. His hands, which had trembled slightly from the crypto shock, clenched into white-knuckled fists until the shaking stopped. For a long moment, he just stared into the middle distance, the weight of 3 centuries of silence pressing down on him. Liz could almost see the ghost of 1 billion people flicker behind his eyes. He squeezed them shut, took one deep, shuddering breath, and when he opened them again, the ghosts were gone, replaced by a cold, hard fire. The last one awake, maybe, he said, his voice quiet. We were a sentimental species, but we weren't stupid. They wouldn't have gone quietly. They would have gone to the ground, left breadcrumbs. Before Liz could begin to process the staggering implication of his words, the bunker shook violently. A fresh shower of dust rained from the ceiling, and Kurth's voice crackled over the comms high with panic. Commander, compact dropships are on final approach. They've breached the outer perimeter. We've got maybe 10 minutes until they breach the bunker itself. Jace's expression didn't change, but his entire posture shifted. In a blink, he was no longer a disoriented man grappling with a lost century. He was a predator, coiled and alert, who had just caught the scent of prey. 10 minutes, he mused, a dangerous energy suffusing him. How many ships? 3 heavy transports, Liz reported automatically, her mind struggling to keep up. Approximately 90 Marines each. 270, Jace nodded, a grimly approving look on his face. Good numbers. Not too many to be unsurmountable, not too few to be boring. Should be fun. Fun? Sinja stared at him, her 4 eyes blinking out of sync. Are you completely certifiably insane? Jace considered this with a moment of genuine seriousness. The psyche evals were never conclusive, but probably, yeah. He pointed a thick finger at the bunker's main entrance. That's the only way in? There's a maintenance shaft. Perfect. He fixed his gaze on Sinja. Sinja, right? I need 3 things. Something that goes boom, something that goes very boom, and something that goes stab, in that order. Despite every rational instinct screaming at her, Liz found herself coordinating. The human's confidence was a virus, a contagion of pure, focused intent that burned through the bunker's atmosphere of fear. Within minutes, Jace had acquired a set of ill-fitting rebel fatigues that strained at the shoulders, 2 thermal grenades, and what Sinja assured him was a shaped charge capable of cutting through starship hull plating. Beautiful, Jace whispered, kissing the explosive device with a genuine unnerving affection. Oh, I missed you too, Science. The first squad of compact Marines appeared at the bunker entrance just as Jace vanished into the maintenance shaft above. Clad in polished silver armor, they advanced in a flawless, disciplined arrangement. Their pulse rifles locked on target. Their movements were a symphony of deadly purpose. They were not prepared for a barefoot human to drop from the ceiling behind their point man, using the shaped charge not as a breaching tool, but as a makeshift monstrous morning star. The impact shattered the Marine's helmet and sent the squad staggering. Before they could recover, Jace ripped a live plasma pack from a fallen rebel's belt, overrode the safety, and tossed it into their midst. The resulting blast of superheated gas took out the first fire team and plunged the bunker into a flickering, strobing twilight. In the shearing chaos, Jace moved like a phantom. He slid behind a Vorthak corpse, using its bulk as a shield, then kicked it forward into 2 advancing Marines, knocking them off balance. As they stumbled, he was already past them, a shard of broken metal in his hand that he drove into the unarmored joint of another's knee. The Marine went down screaming. Jace picked up his rifle, and through the din of plasma fire and panicked alien screams, Liz could hear him laughing. Not the manic cackle of madness, but the genuine, unadulterated joy of a master craftsman at his work. When the smoke cleared, Jace stood among the wreckage of 2.5 centuries of military evolution, covered in dark blue-green alien blood that wasn't his own. He was holding a length of metal rebar he had torn from a collapsing wall. The surviving compact Marines, 3 of them, were in a full panicked retreat, screaming into their comms about impossible human tactics and requesting immediate orbital bombardment. Well, Jace said, examining his handiwork with an air of professional satisfaction. Well, Jace said, examining his handiwork with an air of professional satisfaction. Anyone got an aspirin? Maybe some whiskey? Bad news goes down better with whiskey. Liz stared at him, at the carnage, at the way her own soldiers were looking at Jace with expressions caught somewhere between awe and primal genetic terror. A young Lithian soldier, his rocky hide pale, whispered to his squad mate. He used Gorok's body as a shield. You're not a weapon, she said quietly, the words surprising even herself. A desperate hope against the evidence before her. Jace looked at her, and his terrifying smile softened just for a moment. Nah, I'm human. There's a difference. He paused, hefting the metal bar. Though, to be fair, it's a pretty subtle one. Her calm crackled again. This time it was Admiral Thane of the Compact's 3rd Fleet, his voice tight with an alarm that bordered on panic. All units, withdraw immediately. Target is confirmed as human active. I repeat, withdraw immediately. Sanction Omega is in effect. The transmission cut. In the echoing quiet, Liz heard her own voice ask, Who are you? Jace shouldered the metal bar like a rifle. I'm Jace Marengo. Back on Earth, they call me the Demolition Diplomat. Liz frowned, the term unfamiliar. What does that mean? He gave her a grin that was all sharp edges and dark humor. It means I discovered that the most effective negotiation is one where the other party's building is on fire. As he walked toward the bunker exit in the alien sunlight, he added, looking over his shoulder, Oh, and Commander, next time you want to wake something up, maybe read the warning labels first. A month later, the Nomad's Edge was no longer a ship on the run. It was the flagship of legend. Jace Marengo's name was a whispered prayer in rebel outposts and a curse on the bridges of compact cruisers. Victories that had once been unthinkable were now becoming routine, each one a testament to Jace's brutal, unpredictable genius. But the legend was restless. Captain Verith, Jace said, not bothering to look up from the star charts scattered across the bridge's central table. He was marking shipping lanes with a red stylus, each stroke deliberate. How long before we reach the Solitude Relay? Captain Verith, the ship's nominal commander, shifted uncomfortably in his commander chair. The Lithian's flinty hide had gone pale over the past few weeks, a network of fine cracks spreading from his jaw. 6 hours, sir. But I should point out that Admiral Thane's 3rd Fleet has established a patrol pattern. Not Admiral Thane anymore. Jace tapped the stylus against his teeth. Intelligence says they promoted him after his last encounter with us. High Executive Malvin is running the show now. Liz approached the table, her azure skin reflecting the harsh bridge lighting. As Jace's unofficial second-in-command, she had learned to read the dangerous energy that preceded his more ambitious plans. Jace, the 3rd Fleet has 11 dreadnoughts. We have 1 heavy cruiser and whatever escort ships haven't deserted us this week. 11, Jace repeated, a grim smile touching his lips. I like those odds. From the engineering station, Sinja's voice cut across the bridge chatter like a plasma cutter through hull plating. Those odds are a statistical certainty of annihilation, and I'm the one who'll have to keep this bucket of bolts together while you're playing war games. Jace finally looked up, his storm gray eyes meeting the stocky Vorthak engineer's four-eyed glare. Over the past month, Sinja had become the only crew member who still spoke to him without that mixture of awe and terror that had infected the others. An irritation born of shared duty, he had discovered, was infinitely more refreshing than hero worship. Sinja, what's our structural integrity looking like? Like we've been fighting a war with superior forces for a month, she snapped, wiping grease from her knuckles with a stained rag. Hull stress is at 60% of recommended tolerances. The port plasma manifold is held together with sealant and prayer. And don't get me started on the life support recyclers. Good. Then we're exactly where we need to be. Vera's voice cracked slightly. Sir, they're demanding our surrender. Standard compact transmission, full authority codes. Jace walked to the forward viewport, pressing his palm against the cold, transparent steel. Through the swirling crowds of the nebula they were hiding in, he could see the distant gleam of silver hulls, disciplined lattices, perfect predictability. Open a channel to the inevitable. Video transmission. High Executor Malvin's image materialized on the main screen. His silver skin was polished to a mirror finish, his uniform immaculate despite commanding a fleet in active combat. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship was a picture of choreographed purpose. Officers moved like clockwork, data streams flowing like water. Jace Mareko. Malvin's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. You have 5 minutes to surrender your vessel and submit to the compact justice. Your rebellion ends here. Jace studied the image, noting the placement of command stations, the location of blast barriers, the subtle tells that revealed the ship's internal layout. High Executor. Nice ship. Bet it costs more than those planets' annual budgets. You'll surrender, Mareko. Yeah, about that. Jace reached over and triggered the torpedo bay's manual override. Warning lights bathed the bridge in red. Sinja, I need a boarding torpedo. Something fast, something that can punch through their shields, and something with enough room for one very antisocial passenger. Sinja's hands froze over her console. You want to do what now? Launch me at their flagship. In a torpedo. The steady hum of the life support system swelled to fill the sudden vacuum of voices. Even Malvin's image seemed frozen in disbelief. Liz found her voice first. That's insane. That's the point. Jace was already moving toward the exit. Their entire tactical doctrine is based on keeping threats at a distance. They've never had to deal with a problem that starts in their own corridors. The torpedo bay's been converted for cargo runs. Sinja called after him. I'd have to strip out the guidance system, reroute the life support, jury-rig a manual control interface. How long? 20 minutes if I skip the safety interlocks. Skip them. Malvin's voice crackled over the comm. Mareko, your transmission is still active. Are you seriously discussing? Jace looked back at the screen. High Executor, in about 25 minutes, someone's gonna knock on your door. I suggest you answer it personally. He cut the channel. 23 minutes later, Jace floated inside what had once been a standard Mark VII torpedo casing. Sinja had worked miracles with scrap metal and desperation, creating a one-person assault craft that violated at least a dozen safety regulations. The guidance system was a tablet, duct taped to the inner wall. Life support was a single oxygen canister and a CO2 scrubber that wheezed with each breath. Torpedo bay sealed. Sinja's voice crackled through the comm. You got 15 minutes of air, maybe 20 if you don't panic. I never panic. Jace replied, checking his rifle's charge indicator. I just get creative. And target locked. Their point defense grid is active, so this is gonna be rough. The launch felt like being kicked by a titan. G-forces pressed Jace into the makeshift padding as the torpedo accelerated beyond what human physiology was designed to handle. Through the small porthole, he watched the Nomad's edge shrink to a distant speck before the Inevitable's bulk filled his vision. Compact point defense turrets tracked his approach, spears of coherent light lancing past the torpedo's hull. But Sinja had programmed a tumbling flight path, and the targeting computers couldn't compensate for the chaotic trajectory. Jace felt the impact of his improvised craft punch through the dreadnought's shields and slammed into the hull somewhere near the forward hangar bay. The cutting charge Sinja had built in the torpedo's nose detonated on impact, carving a hole through 2 meters of battleship armor. Jace kicked his way through the breach into a cargo bay where startled compact Marines were still reaching for their weapons. He didn't give them a chance. The first Marine went down to a plasma bolt before his rifle cleared its holster. The second managed to activate his helmet's threat overlay, which painted Jace in a red targeting box just before Jace's boot connected with his chest, sending him crashing into a storage locker. The third got off a wild shot that scored the bulkhead before Jace rolled into a cargo container and put a burst through the junction box controlling the bay's lighting. Strobes of red emergency light pulsed, casting the bay in rhythmic, bloody flashes as Jace moved through the ship's corridors. He wasn't trying to fight his way to the bridge through hundreds of defenders. Instead, he was heading for the engineering decks, where the Inevitable's power systems waited undefended. The ship's internal layout was predictable. Compact vessels followed standardized design principles that prioritize function over improvisation. Jace found the main plasma conduit exactly where he expected it, a massive tube running through the ship's spine like an artery. Two engineering technicians looked up in surprise as he entered the reactor control room. Their training hadn't prepared them for hostile boarding actions this deep inside their own ship. "Gentlemen," Jace said, raising his rifle, "step away from the console." One of them, braver or more foolish than his companion, reached for an alarm switch. Jace put a plasma bolt through the control panel, showering the room with sparks. Bad choice. The primary reactor control interface was a work of art. Translucent gel displays showing power flow, temperature gradients, and safety margins with perfect clarity. Jace studied it for a moment, then began systematically disabling every safety routine he could identify. "Warning," the ship's computer announced in its maddeningly calm voice. "Reactor temperature exceeding normal parameters." Jace overrode the cooling system, routing auxiliary power from life support to the plasma coils. The reactor's output spiked, sending surges through the ship's electrical grid. "Warning, multiple system failures detected. Engineering teams report to..." He shot the speaker, silencing the computer's protest. Throughout the ship, lights flickered and died. Gravity generators stuttered. The Inevitable shuddered as its own power grid turned against it. High Executive Malvin felt his perfect ship dying around him. Damage reports flooded from every deck. Power failures, system cascades, environmental controls offline. His officers worked frantically at their stations, but the failures were spreading faster than they could contain them. "Sir," his technical officer reported, "we're losing main power. Weapons offline. Navigating is failing." "One human," Malvin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "One human did this." "Engineering reports the reactor is going critical," another officer called out. "We need to evacuate." "No." Malvin's silver features hardened. "Signal the fleet. All ships withdrawal to minimum safe distance. Full bombardment of all position." His bridge crew stared at him in shock. "Sir, we're still aboard. The human must not be allowed to escape. That is an order." The acknowledgments came reluctantly from his fleet commanders. On the main holotank, glowing icons representing the other dreadnoughts began to drift away, their weapons powering up. Malvin closed his eyes. The Inevitable had been his command for 8 years. She was dying, but she would take the Chaos Engine with her. Deep in the ship's bowels, Jace felt the deck plating beneath his feet grow warm as the reactor climbed toward meltdown. His sabotage had worked better than expected. The Inevitable was crippled, but he was trapped inside a ship that was about to become a small star. He'd made his way back toward the breach he'd carved in the hull, moving through corridors filled with emergency lighting and the metallic tang of fried circuits. Behind him, he could hear the growing whine of an overboarding reactor core. The cargo bay was empty when he reached it, but through the hole in the hull, he could see the other compact ships withdrawing, preparing to fire. Jace activated his emergency beacon and hoped Sinja was monitoring the right frequency. "There!" Kurse shouted from the communication station. "Emergency beacon bearing 27 Mach 4. Liz was already moving toward the helm. "Full power to engines. Take us in." The compact fleet is targeting the inevitable, Verith warned. If we get too close, then we'd better be fast. The Nomad's Edge dove toward the crippled dreadnought, weaving between the massive ships of the compact fleet. Plasma bolts from the flagship's death throes lit up the emptiness around them. Lock onto that beacon, Liz ordered. Sinja, can you get a transporter lock through their hull? Their shields are down and the power grid is fried, Sinja replied, her fingers a blur as she isolated the transporter signal from a storm of failing systems. I can punch through, but the pattern buffer won't hold for long in this interference. Do it. The transporter beam caught Jace just as the first bombardment of the compact fleet began. He materialized on the Nomad's Edge in a cascade of sparks, his armor scorched and his rifle's power cell drained. Behind them, the inevitable died in a sphere of white fire that briefly outshone the local star. All ships, this is High Executive Malvin, came the transmission from one of the surviving dreadnoughts. Withdrawal immediately. The human is confirmed aboard the rebel vessel. Implement Containment Directive 7. The compact fleet pulled back in its precise lattice, leaving the Nomad's Edge alone in space with the expanding debris field of their former flagship. Jace slumped against the transporter console, breathing heavily. Sinja, next time I ask you to build me a torpedo, add more padding. Next time you ask me to build you a torpedo, Sinja replied, I'm going to have you declared mentally incompetent. 3 weeks later, the ghost signal that had been haunting Jace's dreams grew stronger. It was calling from the edge of the system, where the asteroid fields of the cauldron created a maze of stone and metal that had swallowed entire fleets. Intelligence reports suggested the rebels had built something there. A hidden base, a shipyard, perhaps the key to turning their scattered resistance into a real threat to compact authority. High Executive Malvin, rescued from his flagship's destruction and transferred to a new command, had drawn the same conclusion. His fleet blockaded the asteroid field like a silver net, waiting for the rebels to emerge. 12 dreadnoughts this time, Liz observed, studying the holographic chart in the Nomad Edge's cramped briefing room. They're learning. Jace traced the enemy fleet's arrangement with his finger, noting the overlapping fields of fire. The defensive screen of smaller ships, the careful positioning that eliminated blind spots. He's smart. He's patient. He'll wait us out. The Forge is our last major base, Captain Varys said. If we lose it, we won't. Jay stood up, walking to the viewport where the distant glow of enemy engines painted the asteroid field in silver light. But we're not going to fight them the way they expect. Sinja looked up from her datapad, where she'd been calculating engine stress tolerances. Please tell me you're not planning another torpedo run? No torpedo this time. Jace's smile was sharp and predatory. This time, we're taking the whole ship. The room fell silent. Even by Jace's standards, the statement was breathtaking in its audacity. Jace, Liz said carefully, the Nomad's Edge is a heavy cruiser. We have good armor and decent weapons, but we can't take on 12 dreadnoughts in a straight fight. Who said anything about a straight fight? Jace activated the holographic display, showing the asteroid field in 3 dimensions. Sinja, how much can we strip from this ship? Life support, crew quarters, anything that's not essential to basic flight operations. Sinja's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as she processed the question. You want to gut our own ship? I want to turn it into the biggest, fastest boarding torpedo ever built. How much mass can we lose? The engineer was quiet for a long moment, running calculations in her head. 40% of our current mass, maybe 50 if we're willing to accept catastrophic failure as a likely outcome. I always accept catastrophic failure as a likely outcome. How fast could we go? And with that much mass reduction in full-powered engines, Sinja's expression grew thoughtful. Fast enough to reach the enemy grid before their targeting computers could track us, but the structural stress would tear us apart on arrival. Not if we don't plan to survive the trip. Jace highlighted the center of the compact grid, where Malvin's new flagship waited in a flawless defensive arrangement with its escorts. We punch through their screen, ram the flagship, and board them before they know what hit them. Vareth's voice was barely a whisper. That's suicide. Only if we fail. Jace looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. Anyone who wants off can take a shuttle to the forge. This isn't a mission I'm ordering anyone to follow. One by one, they nodded. Even Vareth, despite his obvious terror, remained seated. Sinja, Jace continued, I need you to strip everything not essential from this ship. Turn the crew quarters into weapons storage. Rip out the recreational areas and install armor plating. And I need you to jury-rig a dead man's switch on the reactor. Something that will turn us into a very large bomb if the mission fails. How long do I have? 6 hours. Sinja stood up, cracking her knuckles. 6 hours to rebuild a starship from scratch. Right. Anyone who gets in my way for the next 6 hours is going out an airlock. The work proceeded with a desperate frenzy. Crew members hauled equipment through corridors that were being torn apart around them, welding new armor plates over structural supports that groaned under the additional weight. The ship's hydroponics bay became an ammunition depot. The officers' mess was converted into a backup bridge. Jace found Sinja 3 hours into the conversion, elbow deep in the engine room's primary power coupling. Sparks cascaded around her as she rerounded plasma conduits with meticulous, unwavering movements. How are we looking? Like a ship held together by luck and excessive stimulant consumption. She didn't look up from her work. Power curve is gonna be insane. When I push the engines to full output, we'll accelerate fast enough to liquefy anything that isn't strapped down properly. And the structural integrity will last exactly as long as it needs to, assuming the laws of physics are feeling generous. Sinja sealed the conduit and moved to the next junction. Jace, there's something you need to know. The dead man switch you wanted? I can build it, but someone has to stay behind to trigger it, manually. The signal delay from a boarding party would be too long. Jace was quiet for a moment. I'll handle it. No. Sinja's voice was firm. You're the boarding party. You're the only one who can do what needs to be done on their ship. I'll stay with the engines. Sinja, this is my ship too. She finally looked at him, her eyes reflecting the harsh glow of the plasma conduits. I've been keeping her running for 3 years. If she's gonna die, she's gonna die properly, with someone who understands her. Before Jace could argue, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. All hands battle stations. Compact patrol is approaching our position. They found us. The run began at the edge of the asteroid field, where the Nomad's Edge emerged from hiding like a bullet fired from the dark. Sinja's modifications had transformed the ship into something that barely qualified as a starship, a flying engine with just enough structure to hold together for one final mission. All power to forward shields, Jace ordered from the makeshift bridge. Around him, the reduced crew fought to keep their stations operational as the ship accelerated beyond all reasonable limits. Maintain course directly through their screen. No evasive maneuvers. The compact fleet reacted instantly, their grid shifting to bring maximum firepower to bear on the approaching rebel ship. But they were operating under the assumption that the Nomad's Edge would try to survive the encounter. Incoming fire, Vareth reported, his voice tight with concentration. Multiple plasma streams, torpedoes spread from the port escort wing. The ship shuddered as enemy fire hammered their shields, but the reduced mass meant the impacts had less effect than expected. They sliced through the compact screen like a knife through silk, their speed turning defensive fire into scattered, ineffective bursts. Target acquired, Jace announced. Malvin's new flagship, the Relentless, loomed ahead of them like a silver mountain. Sinja, full power to engines. Everyone else, brace for impact. In the engine room, Sinja pushed the reactor beyond every safety limit, routing power through conduits that began to glow white-hot under the load. The ship's frame groaned and twisted, held together by structural integrity fields that flickered on the edge of failure. Boarding pods ready, Liz reported from the launch bay. Teams Alpha and Beta are locked in. See you on the other side, Jace replied, sealing his helmet and checking his weapon one final time. The Nomad's Edge struck the Relentless at a closing velocity that turned the collision into a controlled explosion. The rebel ship's reinforced prow punched through the dreadnought's armor like it was made of paper, driving deep into the flagship's superstructure before the two vessels became locked together in a deadly embrace. Jace felt the impact as a wall of acceleration that would have killed him without the crash webbing. Around him, consoles exploded in showers of sparks as the ship's systems failed in cascade. But they were alive, and they were inside the enemy's hull. "Deploy boarding pods," he ordered. The pods launched from what remained of the Nomad's edge directly into the Relentless's corridors, carrying Jace and his strike teams into the heart of the compact flagship. Behind them, their own ship began to come apart, its structure finally succumbing to the stresses of the collision. But in the engine room, Sinja remained at her post, one hand on the reactor controls and the other on the dead man's switch that would turn the dying ship into a bomb large enough to take both vessels with it. Jace found himself in the maintenance corridor deep inside the Relentless, his ears ringing from the collision. Around him, his strike team was already moving, following predetermined routes toward critical ship systems. They had perhaps 10 minutes before compact security could organize an effective response. Unlike his previous boarding action, this was not about surgical sabotage. This was about causing maximum chaos in minimum time. Jace moved through the ship like a hurricane, setting demolition charges on power relays, flooding sections with superheated coolant, and turning the Dreadnought's own systems into weapons. The compact crew, trained for space combat, found themselves fighting a war in their own corridors against an enemy who treated their ship like a weapon to be dismantled from within. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically as Jace triggered atmospheric breaches. Gravity generators failed in sections where he overloaded the gravitational field emitters. He was heading for the bridge when Sinja's voice crackled through his helmet comm, distorted by interference and growing weaker. "Jace, reactor containment is failing. I can give you 5 more minutes, maybe 10, but after that..." Her voice trailed off. "Understood. Get to an escape pod." "Negative. Someone needs to make sure this bird goes out properly. Besides, the engine room is cut off. All breach between me and the pods." Jace presses back against a bulkhead as compact Marines rush past his position, their attention focused on the fires and system failures spreading through their ship. He could hear the growing whine of the dying reactor through the deck plating. "Sinja, just finish the job, you stubborn bastard. And next time you want to ram a dreadnought, find an engineer who's not quite so good at her job." The transmission cut to static. Jace closed his eyes for a moment, then continued toward the bridge. He had work to finish. High Executor Malvin stood in the center of his command bridge, watching his perfect ship die around him. Damage reports scrolled across displays faster than his officers could process them. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, primary power offline, life support failing in 6 sections. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "the human strike teams have reached engineering. They're overloading the primary reactor." "All Marines to engineering," Malvin ordered. "Stop them at any cost." "Sir, with respect, our Marines are scattered throughout the ship dealing with system failures. The human strategy was insidious." The bridge doors exploded inward in a shower of metal fragments. Through the smoke stepped a figure in scorched rebel armor, his rifle trained on Malvin's chest. "High Executor," Jace said, his voice distorted by his helmet speakers. "We need to talk." The bridge crew reached for their sidearms, but Jace's aim never wavered. "I wouldn't. Your ship is going to explode in about 3 minutes. The only question is whether you go down with it, or you find yourself an escape pod." "You're bluffing," Malvin said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Jace gestured to the damage display surrounding them. "Take a look around, High Executor. This is what chaos looks like when it's properly motivated." As if to emphasize his point, the lights flickered and died, replaced by the deep red glow of emergency illumination. Deep within the ship, the reactor's whine was becoming a scream. "You've destroyed us both," Malvin said. "Your ship is as dead as mine. My ship died the moment we rammed you. The difference is, my people knew that was the plan. Jace began backing toward the emergency exit, his rifle still trained on the bridge crew. Your people are about to learn what it feels like when perfection meets entropy. He triggered a demolition charge attached to the bridge main computer core, filling the air with sparks and the sting of burning circuits. 2 minutes, he announced, then disappeared through the exit. Malvin stared at the destroyed computer for a moment, then activated the bridge's emergency comm system. All hands abandon ship. This is not a drill. Jace found the escape pod bay filled with panicking compact personnel, their rigid discipline finally shattered by the immediate prospect of fiery death. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the shocked stares his rebel armor drew, and sealed himself into the last available pod. The launch was rough, throwing him against the pod's padded walls as the small craft shot away from the dying dreadnought. Through the porthole, he watched the Relentless grow smaller, its hull venting atmosphere and debris from dozens of breaches. Behind the dreadnought, the twisted wreckage of the Nomad's Edge was still embedded in the larger ship's superstructure. 2 vessels locked together in a fatal embrace. The reactor finally let go in a flash that briefly outshone the system's primary star. Both ships vanished in a sphere of expanding plasma, taking with them the compact's most advanced flagship and the woman who had made it possible. Jace closed his eyes and pressed his palm against the cold metal of the pod's hull. Thank you, Sinja. The surviving compact fleet pulled back in confusion, their defensive grid shattered by the loss of their command vessel. In the distance, rebel ships began emerging from the asteroid field, ready to exploit the chaos Jace had created. But the victory felt hollow. The price had been too high. The rescue ship that picked up Jace's escape pod was a converted freighter flying rebel colors. Its captain, a grizzled Vorthak named Boren, helped him aboard with a mixture of awe and caution. Jace Moringo, Boren said as they headed toward the ship's medical bay. I thought you were a legend. Turns out, you're just insane. There's a difference. Not much of one, apparently. Liz found him in the observation lounge 3 hours later, staring out at the debris field where 2 ships had died. She took the seat beside him without speaking, understanding that some wounds needed silence before they could heal. The compact fleet is withdrawing, she finally said. The forge is secure. Your plan worked. My plan got Sinja killed. Sinja chose to stay at her post. That was her decision, not yours. We knew what could happen. Jace was quiet for a long moment. She was the only one who still argued with me. The only one who treated me like a person instead of a weapon. Maybe that's because she understood what you were fighting for. He turned to look at her, noting the exhaustion in her azure features. What am I fighting for, Liz? The same thing we all are. The right to exist without someone else's boot on our necks. She stood up, placing a hand on his shoulder. The rebellion needs you, Jace. Now more than ever. The rebellion needs a symbol. It doesn't need me. He looked back at the debris field. That ghost signal that led you to the forge, it's still out there, calling. It's a breadcrumb, Liz. I think it's leading me to the others. And if there aren't any others? Jace managed a tired smile. Then I'll keep looking. But I won't stop fighting, Liz, just on my own terms. She nodded, understanding. If you need us, you'll be busy building something better than what came before. That's not a job for someone like me. He stood up, shouldering the pack that contained everything he owned. Take care of them. Where will you go? There's a lot of galaxy out there. Plenty of places where a man can disappear. He paused at the doorway. And Liz, next time you wake something up from cryo sleep, maybe check the warning labels first. She watched him walk away, knowing she might never see him again. But across the galaxy, in the deepest councils of the Aurelian Compact, in the hidden shipyards of the growing rebellion, a new truth had taken root. The human was awake, and he was no longer alone.